who by many is considered the successor to the tradition of Socrates. But is he? Was he doing the same thing? No. Nice, quick response there. Yeah, no. The theory of forms. There's reality is elsewhere, and everything down here is an echo of that. Both in terms of physical things, and that's how we can recognize a table, a person, okay, a hat, but also with abstract things. That's how we're able to recognize, well, that's a good thing that you did there. Well, how do I know, where's the goodness? I don't see that. Form of the good, we tap into that. So those abstract things, goodness, justice, beauty, those things are forms. And down here, there's just echoes of sometimes physical things and sometimes non-physical things. That's why we can call those things like justice an ideal in the sense of being a form. Okay, and that's how we recognize things. And that's for Plato what knowledge is. It's remembering. Think really hard back to when you were floating around up there. You do that? That's what knowledge is. And Aristotle, I referenced that painting, Aristotle, Plato was doing this. And I really think that so greatly illustrates Aristotle's view. Like, no, not forms. There is form, but it's down here. And so, what happens? Remember, Plato founded a school called the Academy. And he had a star student, Aristotle. So Aristotle was a student there for many years, and he's actually not from Athens. He's from out of town. He's from a little kingdom to the north called Macedonia. He was sent there by Philip II of Macedonia, who becomes a big deal accidentally a little bit. So Aristotle sent there, so he's a Stagirite. That's where he's from. That's not for that, that's for free. But everybody kind of thinks that what's going to happen when Plato dies is that Aristotle, being the star student, he's also teaching there. So he was a student there for a long time, he's a teacher there for a long time, he ends up working there for like 20 years. That's the guy. He's going to be the head of the academy next. So Plato dies, and who becomes the head of the academy? Chrysippus. Now if you're thinking, I have no idea who that is, precisely. That's kind of the point. Anybody heard of Chrysippus? Yeah, exactly. Wasn't not quite remarkable. But that was Plato's nephew. And so Aristotle goes and founds his own school in Athens. And so this is perhaps the original school rivalry. The Lyceum is his school. And he starts teaching students there. Although the Aristotelians, people that follow Aristotle, they get this nickname that develops later. So no one at the time was calling them this, but they get this nickname of Peripatetics. So if you see this word come up again, it just means people that are into Aristotle. Okay, that's all it means. Now literally what it means people that walk. Why? Because this is how Aristotle would teach. Socrates would show up and ask people questions, right? What would Plato do? I guess he was kind of in a classroom of sorts. Usually if we read the dialogues, it's people just talking at like random parties. Okay? These dialogues, these conversations, that's probably what Plato did. Aristotle would go on community walks. So, meet me down by the fountain. Oh, but there's a fountain. Meet me down at the agora. And then so he would do this thing where a crowd of people would gather around and just walk. He would do a walking talk. What's Aristotle into? Well, again, from this to this, and here's where we'll start. Now, Aristotle's another one where, like Plato, where in order to get a grasp of what Aristotle's getting at, you almost have to read all of Aristotle. However, he is more systematic. Like, he will come out and say, this is what I'm thinking. You don't have to read people having a conversation. For that reason, Aristotle, if you read him, which we're going to read some today, comes across as much more boring. Okay, there's not this conversation thing that's kind of fun in Socrates and Plato, but he's a little bit more precise because he gets to the point. And actually, most of what we have of Aristotle are not his writings. Many of what we have of Aristotle is not his writings. It's actually the lecture notes from his students. So imagine attempting to construct, like 2,000 years from now, what I was saying by compiling your notes that you're making right now. And that's kind of what we have of Aristotle. Right? Now these were exhaustive notes, I suppose. But that's what's going on. So what did Aristotle say? What are his positions? Well, remember for Plato, in the whole world of form scheme, there's basically two things involved. There's the forms and there's matter, right? If I could make it as simple as possible, the forms are up there, there's matter down here, and what we see here in the world are copies of the forms into matter. But here's actually what things are. And he uses this word in Greek, ousia, which means substance in English. Literally being. For Aristotle, we'll call it substance. And that just means, let's not overthink it, like stuff. All stuff. Just stuff. So being a stuff. So if you want to know what a stuff is, like what stuff is this? What stuff is this? What stuff is this? Ousia. If you want to know what something is, he says this. What something is four things. The acronym in English, MEF. These are called the four causes. If you want to know what something is, you need to know the four causes. The Greek for their causes, action. Anyone study nursing? All right. If you do study nursing, or even anything in medicine, you might study what's called etiology. And what etiology comes from this action. Etiology is the study of how you get diseases, like where they come from, like what causes it. So, for example, if you're studying what causes lung cancer and emphysema, cigarette use, tobacco, that's part of the etiology of lung cancer. It's probably caused or exacerbated by things like smoking. What's that? What causes it? These aren't causes in the same sense. This one kind of is. So when we think of cause, we're like, all right, what made that sound? It was my hands coming together, right? And the sound waves dispersing throughout the room. These other causes aren't causes in the same way. Right? We kind of have a narrower view of the notion of cause. It is up there. So if you want to know what something is, you know these four things. So Plato says if you want to know what something is, remember really hard. No. If you want to know what something is, you need to know these four things. Matter, material cause. What's it made of? Efficient cause. In brief, what got it there? And there may be more than one, and then we can narrow it down to what's the principal efficient cause, which we can call the instrumental cause. Put that one there for a moment. Like the one you really, really, really need. We'll talk about that again. The formal cause. What does it look like? What shape does it have? And the final cause. What's it for? What's its purpose? What's it do? If you want to have knowledge of something, you need to know these four things. And you have knowledge of a thing. It's not remembering the form. Now, notice the word form is up there. That's hiding right there. Like morphe, like to morph in Greek. But for him, there's not a form up there. Where's the form? Right in front of you. So let's talk about what the four things mean and see if this is an exhaustive account of knowledge. Material cause, what's it made out of? So let's take a tree, for example. Philosophers are always talking about trees because I guess they're just looking outside. Hey, look, there's something. What's it made out of?
Wood.
Wood, for the most part. There's some other vascular components, like those veins on the leaves are made out of wood, but yeah, most of it, yeah, sure. All right, so tree stuff, woody, pulpy, vascular material. All right, cool. Efficient cause, what got it there? Now, what does a tree need to grow? It needs a few things, right?
Sunlight.
All right, that's an efficient cause.
Water.
Earth. We've got a lot of elements there. So yeah, it needs all those things, but there is the Romans will use this expression, sine qua non. Put that up here. Sine qua non. That's a Latin expression. Aristotle will use it. Spicy Latin expression. Sine qua non, which means that without which. So yeah, all those things are totally necessary. A tree can't grow without them. But there's one that, if you will, is the linchpin, the kicker. That without which, if we don't have, the tree's not happening. What is it?
The seed.
Precisely, the seed. So I mean, you can have water, earth, sunlight for days. That doesn't. Where are the trees? You need the seed to make that happen. So you need all those other things. Those are all efficient causes, but the primary or the instrumental efficient cause, the sine qua non, the one that without which, that's the chief efficient cause. And when we talk about cause today, like cause and effect, this is the one we mean. What caused it? What made it happen? How to get there? We mean this one. And actually, you'll see over the last 2,000 years, Aristotle kind of starts a lot of scientific methodology in a lot of ways, and what's happened over the last 2,000 years has been narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed. Part of that's because of Francis Bacon and others in post-Renaissance, early Enlightenment. So we got that one. Efficient cause one got there. So there, we talked sunlight, water, earth, dirt, but it needs a seed to grow. Formal cause. This is the one that's most peculiar to us, I think. What's it look like? Not a trick question.
A tree.
Yeah, a tree. It looks like a tree. That's important. Now, that might seem like, well, of course it looks like a tree. It's a tree. But that's actually, that's part of how you identify or have knowledge of things. You look at it, and you say, it looks like a tree. Because it is. And you're able to recognize the form that's there in front of you. It's not a remembering back, it's right there. And we'll come back to that, all right, in terms of how that's different from Plato. And then final cause. And this is the one that becomes controversial over time. In fact, in many ways, the Protestant Reformations and even modern progressive movements, this is primarily their objection to the ancients. The final cause. What's it for? And keep in mind, Aristotle's in a pre-modern world, surely. What's a tree? So to us, this can be a kind of a peculiar question. What's a tree for? Seems a little less obvious to us. What's a tree for?
Oxygen.
Okay, that would be. I think that now obviously Aristotle's not going to know anything about oxygen, right? But I think in a modern sense, we could say, yeah, that's what a tree's for. Trees are for making oxygen. And that would be an acceptable Aristotelian answer, or at least in an Aristotelian vein, because it's explaining that's what trees do. That's what they're for, so that's why we should have them. Now there's a moral component into it too. That's what, and this is where it gets tricky. Final causes, it's what things are for, and hiding underneath there is explaining that's what they should do. I think you should use something for what it's for. Now we'll see that work out a little bit more in the Middle Ages, especially in Christian thought, as they adapt this. Final cause, what something's for. So, let's explore a couple of things like this. Material, right? Let's look at this marker here. Let the record show pointing at the marker. What's it made out of? Material cause, what's it made out of? It's a combination of materials. What's it made out of? What's it look like?
Plastic.
Plastic, sure, we can go with that. And there might be some fibers in there on the tip and things like that, sure. All those would be material cause. Efficient cause. How to get here?
Somebody bought it at some point and brought it.
Yep, somebody bought it and brought it. So that explains how it got into my possession, but also like how to get here. I don't just mean here now. Like, why does this marker exist?
Like there was a need for it to like write on.
We're getting there. That's going to be down here, I think. Right? Yeah. That's part of it. These things all interact with each other too. Like that's yeah. Certainly, someone was like, "There's a need for this, so we need to produce it." So this was made in a factory somewhere, right? Formal cause. What's it look like? Marker. And sometimes we have like trick things, right? You know, it looks like a banana, but it's actually a pen, or something like that. It looks like a marker. We're able to recognize what it is from its appearance alone. No, I haven't passed this around the room. Anybody have ever seen those things like those fake sticks of gum?
Go ahead.
It looks like it has the formal cause, and that's why you make the mistake. You wouldn't go, no, you wouldn't do that willingly. It's only because you're fooled by the formal cause there that you think it's something else. And we do that sometimes. Sometimes we make mistakes. And this one changes from perspective too. So you might be standing right under a tree. You think it's really, whoa, it's huge. Not so big. If I throw it out in the hallway, it'll look tiny. What size is it? Well, it depends on where it's being perceived. Final cause. What's it for? What's the marker for?
Ready.
There you go, writing. Is it? That seems like the obvious answer, right? So there we got like a final cause. We can deduce it from reason. But I've seen a professor throw this at students before. So I can say it's for punishment. But there's debate of what things are for. What are human beings made out of?
Water.
Generally speaking, what are we made out of?
Water.
Fleshly bags of mostly water. Yeah, I can live with that. Yeah, and then the Greek answer is typically body and soul, more or less. By more or less, I mean like Plato. They're like, yeah, it's body and soul, but soul isn't imprisoned in the body. Aristotle's like, it's body and soul, but it's a good relationship. Okay, soul is still better than the body, but it's not an imprisonment. Efficient cause. How did we get here? We have parents, right? Okay, there you go. And so yeah, there's how did I get here? Well, you know, I applied for college. Yeah, sure, all that stuff happened, but eventually you started somewhere. Formal cause. What do you look like? You kind of look like a human being. So do other things. You can see a mannequin that kind of looks like, but something seems off. Right? Why? Because it literally is lacking any of the efficient cause, the material cause, and it's not really doesn't have that soul in there either. Final cause. Even a dead body, right? Like a human body. Like if you've ever been to like an open casket funeral, is that a human being? It's human flesh. But there's something. It's not quite there. It's not exact because the soul's not there. Right? That's what's missing. Aristotle saying. Final cause. What are human beings for?
Depends on who's saying
Yeah, it does. And we'll say, generally speaking, Aristotle's going to say human beings are for happiness. We're here to be happy. Now, he means something very specific by happiness. It means more like a contentedness. It doesn't mean like, yippee. But he means a kind of contentedness, eudaimonia. Where this gets tricky is like humanity generally, all right, that sounds pretty good. We're made of, you know, flesh and soul. We got here by reproduction of some kind in the past. We look like human beings, and we're for being happy. The problem is that when you start to narrow this down to particular roles is where it gets controversial. When you start asking questions, what are these people for? Well, these people should be slaves. That's their final cause. That's what they're for. And that exact kind of Aristotelian argumentation in that vein does get used to defend slavery later in Europe. There's a Bartolomeo de las Casas, who is a hero. He was there with Columbus, and describes one of the terrible things that happened. Goes to court in Spain and says, please, we cannot treat the natives of the Americas this way. And there is his opponent before the Spanish king is this courtesan named Sepulveda, who says, but Aristotle says we totally can. His entire argumentation for the defense of slavery is predicated on some people are for this. And they actually might even be made of different stuff. It's not just be racist people. Sometimes this can be about gender roles. What are women for? Let me be clear. I'm not espousing any of these positions. I'm just saying that this is how they get employed. What are women for?
reproduction.
Yeah. And cooking and cleaning if they can get around to it. Precisely. So that's how this gets used. Now, Aristotle, for the most part, is fairly innocuous. He doesn't make these kinds of arguments. He just has the apparatus here. But it gets used or employed by others later on this way. There's other people who take this. I think of John Calvin, who says, he talks about how Christianity was this way. Like the efficient cause was Christ dying on the cross. The formal cause is what it looks like. The final cause is for the glory of God and stuff like that. So this apparatus gets used in all kinds of ways. But that's one of the ways it gets employed that makes Aristotle controversial. Okay, in say contemporary progressive ethics, what are reproductive organs for? Genitals. What are they for? Now traditionally, what are they for? Reproduction. And so often there's a moral component that gets added to that says, well, that's what they're for, that's what they should be used for, so if you do anything non-reproductive with reproductive organs, then it's wrong and unnatural because it's out of accordance with its final cause. So traditionally, that's why some forms of sexuality have been considered unnatural. And what that means is it's being used out of accordance with its final cause. Which means the argument ends up being analogous to if I use a spoon to catapult food. That's not what that's for. That's the exact kind of argumentation that gets used here. Now again, Aristotle doesn't say too much about that in that capacity, but other Aristotelians, much later, especially in the Middle Ages, do. But for Aristotle, at least, this is a framework for saying how we know things. Matter, efficiency, formality, finality. You want to know what something is? Answer these questions. And like I said, I think he means it in a fairly innocuous way. Some of those other importations I was mentioning are developed later. But you can use, I think this is a fairly sufficient apparatus to describe things. This one ends up being controversial when you talk about what the thing's for. And very subjective, I think. For example, in answer to the question, what's a tree for? You know what Aristotle said? Shade. Sounds good. Yeah. I've got a hot day. I want some shade. I don't know if that's what it's for. And often the whole what's it for thing implies as Thomas Aquinas will say later, design. If it's there for a reason, was it programmed in that way? And this seems to imply a program. So some others later will object to that. But so, where are these causes? In the thing. We'll talk more about this later. That's part of knowledge. And this is sort of like Knowledge 101. This is the introduction to these ideas. You also need to know part 2, if you will, 2 things. In order to have knowledge, you need to start with this, and then you need to also understand potentiality, dynamine, we're going to word dynamite, and actuality. And related to that, inertial capacity. Alright, so that stuff's a starting point. Then we need to know potentiality, and actuality. What does that mean? Well, potentiality and actuality involve the notion of kinesis, or change. This means change. For whatever reason, in English, it's almost always translated as motion. But that has changed over time. So when we think of motion, we think of, this. The older use of the word motion, it means any kind of change whatsoever. So if something rusts, that's motion. We wouldn't think of it as motion, but it is because it's a change. Or if we wake up and maybe we had a little too much to eat and we're a little bit bigger today, that's motion. Even though we might think of it just sort of a change or alteration sometimes. Things change into different things. Okay, now we've been talking about that since we've been talking about Heraclitus. Things change into different things. But not everything can change into anything. So in order to have knowledge of something, you need to have a set or a matrix of what things can change into. So, that's part of knowledge. And the things that something can turn into are its potentialities. Potentialities. What it actually is precisely that. It's actuality. So consider this. Like a tree, go back to that. A potentiality of a tree. What can you carve? What can you cut it down and carve it into? What can you turn a tree into?
Anything, house.
Yeah. So part of the potentiality of a tree is a house. Now, if you look at a tree, you don't go, look at this beautiful house. No. But can a house be made out of wood? Can a tree be made out of wood? Oh, same material cost. Okay. But some other stuff here. Efficiency for the house. Someone cut trees down and start laying planks here. Formal cost. It looks like a house. Now maybe it's a tree-shaped house. Okay, but it looks like a house. We know what a house is when we think. What final cost? Living in as opposed to shape. Okay. But that's part of the set of potentialities. Whatever you can cut a tree down and carve it into, maybe you don't even need to cut it down. What you might turn it into some sort of wooden monument where it still hasn't even left the ground. A great stump. So potentiality is knowing the possible set of what things can turn into, knowing that it's in a process of motion. That it might not ever become those things, but it could. Now, on the other hand, take that same tree. Is it part of its potentiality to become, say, a metal fork? That's not in the cards. Why? Because that stuff doesn't turn into that stuff. Could we turn the whole thing into a wooden fork? Yes, because that's part of its set of potentialities. And then its actuality is whatever it is at the moment. There's a sense of realization, like, I made it. It finally became what it is. So, for example, it's in the potentiality of a tree to become a wooden fork. It's there. Or a baseball bat. Is it in the potentiality of a baseball bat to become a tree? No. It actually is a baseball bat. When before the whole time the tree was there, before that baseball bat was carved, the potentiality, it's not like the baseball bat was hiding in the tree somewhere and had to be extracted. But in a sense, the possibility of it was. Not like the possibility of something you could reach in there and find. Behold, Google slope. Not always. But it's in there. So this is part of knowledge as well. And it's also knowing what potentiality some things have. So for example, I'm going to assume for the sake of argument that none of you are graduates of this institution. Right? None of you have a degree from here. I do. I wouldn't pay for another one. So right now you are all potential graduates of this institution, whereas I'm an actual. Does that make sense? Okay, and that means, the potentiality means you're in motion too. Again, you're not moving towards your degree in a physical sense of motion. But there's changes going on. Okay? Trying to assign 2 more credit hours, you keep going in motion towards there. And when does it actually happen? Is it when you walk across the stage? No, that seems to be like an old, sacerdotal traditional. When's the moment that it happens? So this is also what things get tricky. At what point in time does something change? Definitively. And if you zoom in, that's kind of hard to figure out. Just like zooming into an image and trying to find the exact line of something, and you get blurrier and blurrier as you go in. At what moment do you become a legal adult? On the very second of your 18th birthday? Were you any really different before? So if we go back to your 17th birthday, 365 days and 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds, are you a different person? But something changes later. Oh, no, I'm actually an adult. Technically, sure. But so that is to say, going in and zooming in exactly where the change happens is difficult to figure out, but obviously if we zoom out far enough, we can see that those changes are the case. So knowing potentialities and actualities. And then also recognizing the different kinds of changes that there are. And Aristotle spent a lot of time talking about a particular verb. So let me talk about this. This is important for Aristotle, and then we'll see why. So Aristotle starts here, okay. Here's what knowledge is, but here's some other stuff you need to know. I'm going to give this to you in English. To be. What something is. The substance of what something is. Yeah, you need to know the 4 causes. Yeah, you need to know its potentiality and actuality if you want to have actual knowledge. It's not just remember the form. The form's right in front of you. Why does it look like a table? Is it an echo of a table? No, it's because you've seen tables before, and you've really sort of made a composite concept from your visual experience. Says Aristotle. And these things add up, and they shift and change. Aristotle says this, when it comes to the verb to be. You may not know this, but there's actually 10 different ways to use it, and this is important for getting at expressing ourselves correctly. There are 10 ways to use the verb to be. The first way is substantially, or essentially. Those words get used interchangeably. Because this Greek word ousia, in Latin there are 2 words to translate it. One, substantia, and the other is essentia, where we get substance and essence. So when you're talking about essence or substance, which kind of mean the same thing even in English, you're talking about what something really is. What is it? So what are you? Essentially, or substantially. Now substantially in English has a little bit of a different connotation. What are you, in essence, what are you? Not a trick question here. What are we? Human beings. All right, so that's an essence. But I can also say, what are you? I'm here. Is that an essential thing going on there? That you are here? Must you be here? Or I'm tired. So you said I am tired. No, that's different from saying I am a human being, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. And this is something that Aristotle figured out in Greek too. Right, he's the first person that we know that really articulates this. Granted, some of the Nyaya Sutras in India will say things like this too. So he says, all right, there's a way to talk about the be. We're talking about the essence. I am human. Not human. Human. The am there, the verb to be, is performing a substantial or essential function. It's saying what something is, as a definition. But then there are these other ways to use the verb to be, which are accidental. Accidental in an Aristotelian sense just means non-essential, or non-substantial, or inessential, I could say too. And what does it mean by inessential? It doesn't have to do with essence. So when we say inessential, we say, oh, it means something unimportant, right? It's not that these are unimportant. And accidental does not mean like, oops, but it means accidental in the sense that these have nothing to do with the essence. And so there's 9 other senses. Quantity. How many is it? How many human beings are you? I don't know, like I'm one. Okay, I'm one. Like so, when we say like I am one, you are not the number one itself. Right, what are you? You're referring to your own quantity. Okay, now most of us are one, but when we even say things like, I'll take, those are 4 desks in the front row. I'm using the verb to be there. I'm conjugating in that sense. I'm using that in the sense of quantity. Quality. Really, anything where you say I am, followed by some sort of descriptive predicate. And what's a predicate? Something that reflects back to the subject. Right, descriptive. So if you back to English class. Subject, verb, that's a complete sentence. Subject, verb, predicate, now we're good. What does the predicate do? It refers back to the subject. So really, any predicate can follow that. That's not the essence. Like what? Those things I said earlier. I am here. Don't let me be too specific. Here we go, I'm tired. Usually it has to do with appearance here. It's things like, I am old. I'm bald. I'm ginger. What Aristotle's pointing out here is what we'll often do is we will conflate quality with essence. What do I mean by that? Let's say, I am, if I say something that's like I am bald. I'm getting there. That's a quality. But what we'll do is something, that person is that way, and sometimes we can import that in. Oh, that's that kind of person. They are this as though it's an essence, and we conflate essence with quality. Don't do that. It's an essential mistake. It's a category mistake. But we'll do that sometimes. We conflate quality with essence. We conflate a feature of something with what it is unto itself. But that's not all. What else we got? Relation. I am at the board. Usually there we have a subject and an object. I have some sort of relation to something around it. Okay, I am standing on the floor. I am under the ceiling. Okay, relation to something else. Which is a different place. Place. I am in Aiken. There you go. But again, that's different from saying I am human. But I'm still using the verb to be. Time. In English, this doesn't exactly work. I am at 2:36 p.m. Usually, we almost always in English use time with place. Like I'm in Aiken at 2:36 p.m. But I'm just going to go and do that. I am at 2:36 p.m. State. This refers to something that's usually it's not a quality that's inherent in the substance. Like like quality would be stuff like I am tall, I am short, I am bald, I am brown-eyed, I am bearded, I am female, I'm male, I'm non-black, what have you. State, on the other hand, is some sort of like accessory on top. Like I am clothed. Okay, so the clothing isn't a part of my body or substance. It's an affectation that's on top. So I think like Barbie accessories. What's she gonna wear? It's not part of the Barbie itself, but it's stuff that goes on top. Okay, I am shod. I'm wearing shoes. Action. Well, when you were in elementary school, what did they use to tell you? How did they define a verb? Anybody remember what kind of word is it? Yeah, the action word, right? Sort of. Because what verb are most of you doing right now? Sitting. Sound like an action word? Not really, but exactly. The Greek allows for there's verbs of action and verbs of passion. Now, passion does not mean, when we think of passion, we think passion. You know what I mean? action. A verb where there's obviously significant motion going on. Like, I am running. That's an action word. That's an action word. We can also have passion word. Now in English this gets weird because we don't like to use the passive voice. This. What passion means is that something, action is where you're going to do something. Passion is where something is done to you. So for example, when you go to the doctor's office, what are you?
Patient.
You are a patient because there's passion going on. That is, something is happening to you. That's why you're a patient. So patient, passion, those things are related. Action, agent, those words are related. So if you go do something, you're an agent. If something's being done to you, you're a patient. So action and passion. So there are passion would be things where it's being done to you. Like I am being attacked. There you go. You're not attacking. It's happening to you. And again, in English that sounds funny. I think there's like I am being examined by the doctor. That's true. We usually use something more colloquial. I'm at the doctor's office. They're getting care of. And we make ourselves the agent of the sentence. Well, all right. This is great. What's so important about this list? Here's 10 ways to use the verb to be. So what? Here's what. Every kind of change or kinesis that there can be has to do with one of those categories up there. So these are called Aristotle's categories. These are the different ways we can talk about stuff. So if you're going to have knowledge, you need to know the four causes. You need to recognize the difference between potentiality and actuality. And you need to recognize how we use language. So that when I say something like, that is a planet, which is am I looking at the heavens and I'm looking at the sky and I say that is a planet. Which is are you using? Because that's very important. Are you talking about essences? Are you talking about qualities, relations, places? Which one are you talking about? Especially when we're talking about big stuff. God is, finish the sentence, which one are you using here? If God is angry. That's the essence? Is that a quality? Is that a state? Which is it? So it's very important we figure out how we're using language in order to get our knowledge right. When we're talking about things, we need to know how are we using our language to say things. Because we usually just think language is a given. For us, it's obvious. But you know this, if you've ever had some sort of conflict with somebody, I see your hand there. We ever had a conflict with somebody where they misunderstood what you said? You know it might make sense in here, but somehow there's a miscommunication in how it comes out. I didn't read it that way. No, that kind of thing. Yes, go ahead. Oh, posture. Posture, on the other hand, is a way in, that's the one where it's the action verb that's not in motion. So like sitting. I am napping. So it's still a verb, but it's not really describing a state of motion, but a state of just vareness, if you will. I'll stick that there. Here we go. I am sleeping. That doesn't mean, that's not an essence. You're not saying I am sleeping itself. Yes.
Can you explain relaxation again?
Oh, relation.
Oh,
It does,
relation.
now with my handwriting, it does look like relaxation, so you're good. Relation is saying like I am next to the lectern. I'm by the computer. I'm under the ceiling. So really, for relation, you need to have a subject and an object. The categories up there, they're really the main four that Aristotle focuses on are the first four. That's why I have them rapid. Really, if you want to understand stuff, you need to understand the change of this. So things can change. What kind of changes do we have here? So I'm by the lectern. How does that change? And now I'm by the board. Kinesis, change. Kinesis, that's where we get like our word like kinetic energy. Right? That means it could change. So that's locomotion. That was pretty easy. And locomotion refers to motion in space. I don't mean space, the final frontier. I mean space like X, Y, Z axis. A change in quality, on the other hand, that is an alteration. Anyone go to prom? Military ball. There you go. If you did, what might you have done to that dress or tux before you showed up?
It altered.
You might have gotten it altered. Yeah, there you go. Or you might go back to fit. This doesn't fit anymore, make it fit. Now, does it change in essence what the garment is? No, it wouldn't. It's still a dress, or it's still a tux, or it's still a pair of pants. But what if it changes something about it, but not the substance? That's what we say, alterations. Literally, alteration job. That's what they do. You're not changing what it is, but you're changing some feature about it. That's an alteration. You get some feature changed, but it doesn't change the essence. Okay, that one's pretty straightforward. Quantity. This one's got two directions now. Augmentation and diminution. Don't let those big words fool you. Augmentation. Diminution. Right, things get bigger, things get smaller. But they also get more or less. In addition, like I can have, and this is where words like less and fewer come into play. Like I can have many dollars, or I can have more money, or I can have fewer dollars and less money. The fewer has to do with like it's something you can actually count. It's countable. It's something like you can't really measure how many drops there are in the ocean. So there's more or less water. You don't really talk about fewer water. Augmentation, you either get bigger, if you inflate a tire, it blows up. A balloon augments, it gets smaller. But you can also have more or less. So you can have $1 billion versus you have, oh, I made a mistake. I bought James stocks. And now it's plummeted. I don't have as much money now. What do you get for trusting a Reddit? But so, and now my what I'm investing has gone down, so it's diminished. It's not like the amount there. It's not that it got like some substance physically got smaller, but in terms of the amount of what you had got smaller. So things get bigger, things get smaller. That's quantity change. And then finally, the big one. What do you call it when you have a change of essence? Well, there's two here too. When something comes into being, it's generation. And then something being generated. So what does it mean to generate? Something comes into being. When something comes into being, something that was not before now is. It now has being. And trying to find that exact threshold moment is difficult. I'll talk about how some places where that comes up today when we're talking about Aristotle. But what do you call it? When something comes into being, that's generation. What do you call it when something goes out of being? The technical word here is corruption. I know we use it sometimes in politics to talk about it when people are, dirty, doing things they should not be doing. Really, corruption means that it's going out of being, like it's falling apart. That's what the word corruption literally is to fall apart. Now, if something transitions from being a substance into another substance, the thing that it was before goes out of being, or the thing that it's becoming comes into being. So becoming is this process of going out of being and coming into being at the same time. And this relates to potentiality and actuality. So like right now, you are still potential graduates, right? But if you're a senior, you're more towards that generation of being a graduate, and you're going away from, you're being just a student waiting is actually corrupted, it's dissipating. It's being corrupted as you get closer to actually being the actual graduate. But corruption doesn't have this negative quality, it doesn't mean going out of being. But at the same time, so you oscillate between the two, between generation and corruption in the process of becoming. So going back to the example I said earlier, like with the baseball bat versus the tree. As that baseball bat or whatever it is being made out of wood is getting carved, the tree is corrupted. It's going out of being. As those wood shavings go flying off, the tree has disappeared. And the thing that's left, the baseball bat or whatever it is being carved, is coming into being. And there's some moment where it goes from being a tree to being a baseball bat. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly where that moment is. And this is why where does this kind of stuff come up today? Still, using notions of, say, a fetus. This comes up in moral debates on the notion of abortion. When is a fetus a human being? Now, biologically, it's inarguable that from the moment of being a zygote, there's human DNA there. That's individualized. That's inarguable. But is it human in a full sense? At what point does it really become a fully fledged human? A fetus? Is it zygote, embryo, fetus proper, which is pretty much later? At the moment of quickening, when the mother can feel the fetus? At what moment? X amount of days? When the soul goes in? When does it happen? And so finding that moment, this is why, and we do have moral considerations for this. Is abortion legal in the United States? Yes. Has been for quite some time. On the other hand, are third trimester abortions legal in the United States? No. What's the deal? Why? If it's legal in one sense, why not in that sense? And there's at least a sentiment. Well, that's more, if that's more human, so that's objectionable. Because it's more human at that point. There's a potentiality, and even sometimes fetuses are referred to as potential persons and not full persons, depends on who you ask. But this Aristotelian language comes up a lot in the abortion thing, especially on the conservative side. Okay, well, that's a potential human, and since the final cause of human beings is to grow and perpetuate, it would be immoral to stop that final cause from happening. Because it has the formal cause of being a human. Once it really looks, it's got little arms and little legs, now it looks like a human, it is one, because it looks like one. Aristotelian language, an Aristotelian apparatus to defend that position. Okay, so that's how this stuff, even though it is thousands of years old, over 2,500 years old, well, 2,300 years old, we'll go with that. This Aristotelian framework gets used all the time in everything. And also, Aristotle pretty much wrote on every subject that existed at the time. Pretty much invented every field you could think of. Linguistics, did a little bit here. Epistemology. Metaphysics, he's doing something different from Plato. In biology, he writes a book called On the History of Elephants. Not exciting. By elephants, he just means big animals. He doesn't mean what you think of as elephants. Geology, zoology, all kinds of. Aristotle, if he lived today, he would have like 30 PhDs. Okay, so he's the equivalent of that in his own time, inventing all these different fields. And then the reason why Aristotle is so perpetuated, I think this is a good place to get transition to an ending for today. Aristotle, remember, he got his school, the Lyceum. Then he gets a special job. He gets hired on as a tutor back home. Now, I mentioned earlier, he comes from Macedonia. King Philip is the king. He has this precocious young child who's the prince. Who's the prince? Back in Macedonia. Alexander. Last name, the Great. What does he do? That's not really a thing. Okay. Alexander, what does Alexander do? What makes him so great?
Is it military conquest?
Yeah, military conquest. He takes over much of the area around him at the time. Does he take over the whole world? Did he actually cry when he ran out of places to conquer? No. But basically the other empires that existed at the time, like Persia, completely takes it over, goes all the way to the Ganges River in India. And so there ends up being a Greek world all the way from the Balkan Peninsula to India and parts of, we think of parts of Central Asia, like up into Afghanistan. Like Alexander goes up in the mountains there too. So Greek culture spreads there, and then it becomes this continuum of Greek culture. And then while his tutor, Aristotle, is there, back in Athens, running the Lyceum, Aristotle just keeps sending him stuff home. Like, hey, here's this animal we discovered. It's called a tiger, I guess. And Aristotle studies it back home. That's how he's able to do all his research stuff. Alexander has this logistical train sending stuff back to Greece. And this persists, but it also spreads Greek culture all throughout this space, if you look at a map. That's part of the reason why in this area, like we talk about, like, say, Palestine or Judea at the time. Why is the New Testament written in Greek? Were they Greeks? Because this culture spread. Alexander spread it right here at this time. And so so Aristotle's ideas get perpetuated all the way to India. They're talking about Aristotle in the mountains of Afghanistan. Okay, and other Greek ideas too. It's not just Aristotle. But that's part of the reason why that stuff sticks around. Because once that Greek legacy starts, pretty much what happened at Alexander, there's still stuff Alexander that are being perpetuated today. He started, and him and his, not his descendants, but his successors, ended up doing things like building libraries, starting places of learning, start translating things. Oh, we conquered this people, let's translate their books. Start translating things into Greek, and so that Greek conduit ends up transmitting all kinds of knowledge. So we'll talk more about Aristotle next week. That's why I'm going to be on the springboard and talk more about Aristotle. Probably wrap them up and move on to Hellenistic philosophy. That is the other Greek traditions that come after Aristotle and are simultaneous with Aristotle. And then we'll switch and move over to some Eastern stuff after that. That's the plan. Have a great weekend, everybody. Remember